What's the most surprising thing you've ever uncovered about someone you're close to? Golden Coal. Discovered my colleague faked his own death in his country, if origin due to debt. Sold us all a load of emotionally charged bullshit about tragedies in his family, only for us to find numerous news articles detailing how he left them with mountains of debt, then died abroad. B. Zero Bone One. I found out the friend of a friend of mine won the lottery some years ago, like one of the multi-state ones, 9 figures, all that. I got to hang out at his manse a few times. It was gigantic, like 12K square feet, indoor pool, full bar, elevator, the works. Every time I went over, even if it was just for an afternoon football game with the guys, he always had these insanely beautiful women about half our age hanging out in a bikini or whatever. They looked like the girls you'd see on Instagram wearing designer dresses and hanging out on yachts. I found out after our mutual friend drunkenly told me one day. He said he won in the low 9 figures, but he claimed he had since invested it and now has even more. Human magic marker my Phil served in Vietnam, but never talked about it. It wasn't until just recently he started opening up about the horrific things he saw. The dude has not slept a full night's sleep in over 40 years, but now that he's finally getting help, he's doing a lot better. But the shit he had to deal with over there, man. And then the welcome they got from their own country when they came home. It's no wonder so many of them committed suicide and have serious PTSD, all themagrains. When my husband died in his sleep, the coroner decided to do an autopsy to find out why. The results were that my husband had not kicked his pill-popping habit like I'd thought. It was a large cause as to why he passed. Then, at his viewing before the funeral, the one woman he worked that I had an issue with showed up. She crumpled to the ground on the way to his casket, crying and telling me how sorry she was, but that he was just so good looking. So, yeah, on top of becoming a young widow, I also had a lot to unpack about the life he led outside of our home and marriage. Deleted user. My grandmother was a mean woman. When she got dementia, it took us forever to get people to understand that the sweet version was the dementi, her. And the mean one was what she was like all her life previo, usly. That's kind of important to know for later. The story was that my grandpa was a mean drunk. That he beat up my grandmother and abused my dad when he was a tot. Delur. My grandmother tried to divorce him, but couldn't get the divorce without losing her family's home, which she'd inherited before they were married. The story she told everyone was that my great-uncle, her brother, found him at a dead-end road with a self-inflicted gunshot downed. And then that was that. He was out of the picture. She never talked to us about him. I never saw a picture of him, not hing. I didn't even know what his first name was until after she died. Going through her things, we found a Bible with their marriage date, tons of pictures of him, them as a couple, and some with my dad as a baby. She even kept their marriage certificate. I thought it was weird because the only thing ever said about him was that he was a mean and awful our son. I found out other stuff about him from my great uncle. When she died, I thought it was really weird she kept all that tough, especially since she only spoke about him being such a terrible our son. I did one of those DNA tests. It popped up that I had an uncle and an aunt on my dad's side. Grandpa had been married before, but he had kids with 2 different women. So then I got curious and started going through the family tree and looking for birth, wedding, death announcements in old newspapers online. I found an article about my grandfather's death. He didn't die at the end of a street. He died from a gunshot wound in the house my grandmother and him lived. D.in. I did a Google Street search of the address. All the houses on the street are older 1900s to 1920 style houses that have been kept up over the years. Except where my grandma's house was supposed to be was just an empty vacant lot. There was nothing there but grass, which was really weird because the street is really rather nice with nice homes. So then I did a newspaper search of the address. She called in the suicide the night it happened. Police came and said they'd be back in the morning because it was late. They took off the body but didn't do a full investigation due to the time. Then the next morning, the house caught fire and it burnt to the Everyone in the town and at her job was scared of her. And now I think I know why. She had such a bad reputation that when my parents announced they were getting married, people tried to persuade my mother and my other grandpa not to let them get married because my grandma was such an awful person. I think it's because they all knew she killed my grandpa, but nobody could prove it. A man showed up at her funeral that I never met before. He walked up to me and shook my hand and said, "I used to work with your grandpa. He was a really nice guy. It's a shame they never found out who killed him." When I say my jaw hit the floor, I was dumbfounded. First, because WTF, who says that? And second, that's not what I'd always been told. My husband called me over to him for a second, and then, when I turned back around to talk to the guy again, he was gone. I even went looking outside because I was like, I need answers, damn it. Have no clue who he was, but he pretty much just solidified what I'd though, but didn't know for sure till then. She literally got away with murder. Darcy Mackenzie. I'm not sure this exactly fits, but close to. My parents found out in their early 30 seconds that they were distant cousins. They only found out because my great-grandfather was doing genealogical research. Turns out that both sides of the family lived in a small rural town some generations back with some intermarriage. My maternal grandmothers independently, i.e. they didn't know each other at the time as far as I know, ended up married and raising kids in another small town an hour away. One in the country and one in the city. My parents met in the one high school and went to the prom together, but lost touch. They met up again in university and got married. Because of the way the original intermarriages worked, my sister and I are actually cousins with my parents too. I can locate myself twice on the family tree my maternal grandmother made. Desdemoninat. My cousin C originally found me very annoying. I was 6 years younger and a girl, so that certainly didn't help. But as we grew older, we became very close. He struggled a lot in his 20s, but had really turned around, was married with 2 stepchildren and a baby on the way. I was exceptionally proud of him. And then one day, a few years ago, my mother texted me letting me know C had been arrested for molesting his 8-year-old stepdaughter. Eventually, it came out that he'd been molesting little girls since he was 11 to 12 years old, and that his first victim was his then 5-year-old sister. His bio dad and stepmother were aware and swept it under the rug. He took a plea deal and will get out of prison in about a year or so. I'm currently pregnant with my first child, who he will never know about, assuming my aunt maintains her promise to never speak with him again. And I'm secure in the knowledge that if he ever so much as utters my child's name, I'll rip his throat out with my fucking teeth.